Welcome to Am I Rich Yet? A weekly podcast where we give millennials and Gen Zs tips and advice on how to spend, save, and grow their money smarter. We are on episode 3 today. This is part 2 of our budgeting series where we are answering all the questions that our listeners sent in regarding budgeting. My name is Georgia. I'm one of your co-hosts. I belong to the Gen Z. I am currently an MBA student and I'm navigating my personal finances.
I'm George's dad, Rob, recently retired financial advisor, and I'm here to help you make better decisions with your money.
How are you doing today? What's going on?
I'm great. It's been a long day, but I'm great. Looking forward to winding down towards the end of the day. We're filming this podcast a little late in the day. Looking forward to dinner coming up and maybe a relaxing evening, maybe a boat ride, something like that.
Okay, nice. Did you and Mike used to get to these stages at the end of filming when you needed to take a breather and step back?
It was tough.
Yeah.
We always had to try and squeeze it in. We're 2 schedules. You're trying to match it, and it's complicated.
Yeah, I have a new appreciation for people that are on screen as a full-time job, on air, anything like that. I have a new appreciation.
Great.
So
What are the questions? What are we like? And I call them ARI questions. What does ARI stand for?
he said ARI first off, and I said, okay, are we talking about like the American Eagle sister company or what's going on here? But I then learned ARI is AIRY, am I rich yet?
Yes. So rather than having to say, am I rich yet? We just say here.
ARI.
So what questions does ARI have for us today?
Okay. Like I said, this is going to be a rapid fire style where we answer the question. So let's kick off with the first budgeting question. How should I choose between prioritizing living and doing the things I love, like traveling, but also trying to be conscious of my money and savings?
Okay. So the first place to start is, who is the absolute most important person in the whole equation? Who is it?
It's yourself.
Okay. So who needs to get paid first?
Yourself.
Okay. So, you went from making no money and now you're making money. You need to pay yourself first. So the money comes into your bank account. Some of that money needs to come out of that bank account just as quickly as it came in the form of savings. And the beauty of that is everything else that's left, you get to spend. So how do you prioritize this? What I find when you pay yourself first, then the rest of that money you can spend guilt-free. And I think that's a huge advantage. You know what's left and you can spend it. If you put it on your credit card, you have to pay that credit card off every month. So if you put $1,000 on your credit card, you got to pay that off next month. So you got to factor that into your budget. And maybe every month you're putting $1,000 on your credit card. Okay. So it's guilt-free. If you want a travel budget, you want experiences, things you want to do, set a limit to what you're going to spend and then try and stick to that limit for the year. You can't go on every trip. You can't do savings, have great experiences and go on every trip unless you double, triple, quadruple your income.
Yeah. And we don't need to get too pessimistic. We're going to get into savings and that magic number, which is that minimum 15% that you should be paying yourself with first. And then the rest of the spending will come guilt-free.
So I think what's interesting here is this question said, prioritize experiences. And I think that's important. You can't do experiences and stuff. You can't prioritize both. So if you want to prioritize experiences, that's great. You're going to remember things. You buy a new item in your wardrobe, you wear it once, and it's now just part of your wardrobe. So experiences you will probably remember for the rest of your life, especially if they're good experiences. So just make sure in your spending, you're prioritizing that first and not spending as much money on stuff. Figure out how you can do this stuff cheaper.
Yep. And it doesn't mean we shame the stuff spenders, but I think that's good perspective to have, that experiences and memories you're going to have for the rest of your life, and that dress that sits in your closet once, you'll forget about it.
Absolutely. Okay. What's up next?
Awesome. So that's a good segue into our second question, which is, social spending is huge for our generation, like getting invited to expensive dinners or outing with friends, and we all have different earning levels. So how should we go about carving out a social budget and then knowing what the limit is?
So I'm going to get a little tougher here. One of the things you could do is set up a social budget. What are you willing to spend socially? And you can't go beyond that. If you're going out, if you have a budget for going out for dinner, you may have some nights where you just say, I'll just have water, please. I'll have a soda water. And your friends might say, well, why are you drinking? Once they do that for the first 30 seconds, they forget about it. They forget that you're drinking water all night. Honestly, I stopped drinking about a year and a half ago, and friends don't ask me anymore. They just order a non-alcoholic beer, and everyone doesn't even notice 5 minutes after I've ordered it.
Yep. And
So
if your friends are giving you a hard time, you can say, you pay for me and then I'll drink that drink.
you don't need to go out to have fun. I'm going to date myself here, but when I was your age and starting out, we were recently married, we would spend a lot of time just going to friends' places. We didn't need to go out to a fancy restaurant for dinner. We didn't need to go to a fancy concert, whatever it may be. Yeah, and I'm not saying you can't do that, but you've got to limit that. Maybe you're going out for dinner once every 2 weeks.
Yep.
My wife used to have a rule. We can't go out 3 nights in a row. Now, that was a rule that we just had. So if we were out Thursday night and Friday night, we're going nowhere Saturday night, regardless of what the invite is. Okay. And that was especially important when we had kids, but we also have stuck to it later on. So you get burned out after a while and you spend too much money. Georgia, based on some of the things we've talked about, what do you think you could swap out that's expensive?
I'll take that question a little bit differently, but something that is really important is having these conversations with friends, using sayings like, I can't afford that, or no, and just getting this conversation going with your friends and the main people you hang out with, that wallet has its limits and you're going to be saying no to certain things, and that's okay. And once your friends are aware that you're being conscious of your spending, what's really cool about it is they'll probably start to be a bit more conscious of their spending.
Georgia, what are some of the things that you're doing to cut out spending? Now, you've moved down to Australia. You've had to start. You couldn't take much with you other than a bunch of clothes. So what have you done in Australia that you didn't necessarily do when you were in Vancouver?
Yeah, I was doing this in Vancouver as well, but 3 things that come to mind is first, those important conversations with your friends. Second is the simple swaps, like instead of going out for dinner, eating in. When I think about my time in Vancouver, one of my favorite memories was that every week, Shay, Kaylee, and I would make dinner at one of our houses and we'd rotate whose house we'd go to. And honestly, those nights were more memorable than any night that we went out for a dinner. And then the third is buying used. And I think Facebook Marketplace is quite underused depending on the user. Some people use it for everything. Some people never use it. For example, in Vancouver, I remember I wanted to buy a set of dumbbells for my apartment, and I could have gone and bought those for, I don't know, 100, 150 for a proper set. And I found a pair on Facebook Marketplace for like $10. So if you can start thinking about what you're spending your money on, and does it need to be new? And is there a good chance someone has this up on Marketplace? I think that's another great option for smarter spending.
Okay, sounds good. Next question is one I used to get a lot from my clients. Am I on track? How am I doing? And I guess my first reaction to that when I hear it is stop comparing. You have no idea how everyone else is doing. If someone's driving fancy cars, wearing nice clothes, going out for dinner all the time, chances are they don't have any money behind. Chances are they don't have $1 worth of savings. I used to have clients who would refer friends that they thought had a lot of money. They'd say, oh, this would be a great client for you, Rob. And they would come in and we'd talk. They'd have a big house, 2 beautiful cars, and $100,000 of investments in their 50s. And I'm like, I didn't disclose that to my client, but I'm like, how am I supposed to help this person? They're in their 50s. They've only got $100,000 saved. They're not going to make it work. And they're spending $200,000 after tax a year. It's really tough. There used to be an expression, it's a Texas expression. I always loved it. I've always remembered it. It said, big hat, no cattle. So, big hat, the guy, a cowboy walks in, he's got this massive hat, or the big car, but he's got no cattle.
Yeah.
Having money in Texas is having cattle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about savings. How do you know you're on track? If you are saving minimum 15% to 20% of your income, you're paying yourself first, you're on track. You're on track for you. That's what's important. You're on track based on your income level. Whether you're making $100,000 a year, $50,000 or $200,000 a year, you're on track. And that's the important thing. Okay. If you do the savings, you can reduce the amount of stress financially that you have. Your mom and I, because we did our savings first, we didn't have a lot of stress financially. It wasn't part of we had stress about other things. It just wasn't financial. And that was huge for us.
Yep. I think that's great. The empowerment and guilt-free spending that comes knowing you're saving and setting your future self up for success is beyond.
I know we're going to have people reach out to us because we're early in this podcast series and say, how the heck am I supposed to save 15 to 20% of my income? Can't do it.
Yeah.
We're going to say and show you how you can do it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
What's up next?
Okay. Next question. Why do so many smart, educated people still struggle with basic money management? I have friends who are tens of thousands in credit card debt, but still ordering Uber Eats every night, going on big vacations. How are we supposed to find that balance, enjoying our 20s and 30s without completely sabotaging our financial future? None of us want to live with regret later, but we also don't want to miss out on making memories now.
I think the key to that whole thing is really paying yourself first. You can still spend the rest, but you know what the rest is. If you spend every dollar, there's nothing left for savings. There never is. You're never going to build wealth. And I think a lot of people want to one day be financially independent. They don't want to have to rely on having a job, the government, or their family. They want to be independent. It's one of the greatest things you can achieve in life, being financially independent, regardless of what that level is. Yeah. Why do so many smart people? It has nothing to do with smarts.
Yep.
Sometimes my smartest clients were the worst savers. Sometimes some of my clients who weren't my smartest clients were the best savers. Either a saver or a spender. That's it. So the spenders have a harder time. They need a forced savings plan. The savers, they're going to probably save anyways, regardless of whether it's coming off their paycheck every month or whatever. They're going to always have money left over.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think it's great to hear that you had incredibly smart clients who struggled with their money management. And something that we've talked about too is this isn't taught in school. And there's been this idea that we should have all just developed this understanding out of thin air. But I think what's important also to recognize is that, like anything, you need to practice. You need to read about it. You need to listen to podcasts like this. You need to do and learn for yourself. And it's not just going to come with no effort.
So it's often a product of your environment. If you grew up in a family that put money away and had savings and always say damn resources, you're probably going to be like that. If you grew up with a family that was always relying on the government to make ends meet, you're going to struggle. If your parents were working 2 or 3 jobs, you're probably going to be pretty good at saving money. Are a product of your environment.
But that's not to say that
you can't overcome it. Oh, no, you can definitely overcome it.
Yes. No matter where you're starting or what your parents did, you can learn this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what we're going to be doing over the next 26 weeks is giving you the best ideas on how you can do that for yourself.
I love it. Okay. Next question here. What are the most deadly and least expected drainers of money, savings, income?
Earning more, spending it all, and not putting anything aside is the worst.
Okay.
And number 2, I'd say subscribing to everything. It's really easy. We talked about budgeting and so on. It's really easy to have multiple apps, multiple streaming apps. You may not even use an app for 4 months and you're still paying for it every month. That's stupid. Just turn the app off. Set a reminder on your phone to turn the app off 3 weeks after you've finished the series that you wanted to watch. Banking fees, late charges, monthly fees, Instagram purchases. It's easy to spend money. It wasn't as easy for our generation. We actually had to go out. We had to go into a store and we had to buy, and that's assuming the store had it in stock.
Sounds horrible.
It sounds horrible, right? Now, the world's your oyster. You can just do it from your phone, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. I think that's some good insight there. Now let's move to another question which came up a lot about the ideal income to rent ratio. And I really like this question because this was something that you'd given me and Eric and Lil, that magic number early on. And it really helped me to understand when and where I could afford my rent.
Okay.
Ideal income to rent ratio.
I like 30%. Okay. 30% of your gross income. So if you're making $50,000 a year, 30% of that is $1,500. That should be the maximum your housing costs you. If you're making $100,000, 30% of that, you get $30,000. That's $2,500 a month. At most, it should be 35% if you're in one of those high rent districts like Toronto or Vancouver, or maybe you're in a place that doesn't have a great selection of housing and you got to pay more. That happens sometimes. 35 is the max. If you can get it down to 25%, even better. You're going to be further ahead. That's going to give you more money for spending and saving.
And just to clarify, that 30%, let's lock it in at that. 30% should include utilities, parking, all those things as well?
Everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're renting and there's a condo fee or whatever, you got to factor that in.
Okay. Awesome. Let's jump to our last question here. I like to say that we should always be saving for a house, but with this economy, housing prices and base salaries of most jobs at our age, it's almost impossible. We want to live our best lives, and often that includes enjoying a night out or enjoying a store-bought meal. Even essentials like hair products and makeup or buying a coffee adds up very easily. Now, before you answer this, I love that our writer classified hair products, makeup, and buying coffee as essentials. That's my type of person. Yeah.
Okay. It's everything else. I'm going to get a little tough on this one. I apologize, but stop blaming the economy. The economy's always doing what the economy does. Is the unemployment rate high right now? No, it's 6-7%. It's not horrible. Is inflation high today? It's 3%. It was 10% at different points in my life. So stop blaming the economy for why you're struggling. You're not matching your expenses with your income. You're trying to keep up with everything else. Stop blaming housing prices. Yeah, housing's high. Housing's been high in Toronto, Ontario for a long time. Vancouver, same thing. It's high. We were looking at housing prices in Halifax recently. A house on a nice street, now it was a rental house. It was $1.7 million. It was a wooden house. Who knew? But when you looked at it, it was close to downtown, made some sense.
Yep.
So you don't need to be living in downtown Toronto. Even though your friends are there, you may need to live in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Yet so stop blaming the economy. And if it's an income problem, start looking for a better job. Look for better opportunity. Maybe you need to take a second job. Maybe you need to be bartending, waitering at night, driving Uber, whatever it is to get ahead. You need to get the plane off the ground, and you need to work really hard to get the plane off the ground.
Yeah. A couple things that I like there, this idea that at our age, you can't necessarily afford that downtown Toronto penthouse suite that you want. You give this example of the first house you ever owned, and tell me about that. What was that?
So it was in Thornhill. I had lived in Toronto all my life, so I bought in the burbs. Thornhill at the time was pretty much farmland. And it was right beside a train track that came by at all hours. And it actually felt like the train was driving right through the condo. I had 3 roommates at the time that came and went. And I had some people that I lived with that I didn't really like that much.
Oh, God, I hope they're not listening.
It allowed me to pay the rent, and it allowed me to get into the housing market. And once I was into it, a few years later, I got to do an upgrade to a tiny little house in Richmond Hill. I had to go further north, but I got into the housing market. So
it's great perspective that your first house isn't be all end all. And one thing I want to add to that, find a better paying job. You talked about maybe taking on a second stream of income, 2 or 3 jobs. Another great thing I heard one time in a podcast, the janitor at Meta is making more than the janitor at Walmart. And I think that's some good perspective to have too, that take a step back, have conversations with people in different industries in the same function as you are, and maybe take a look at where your skills might be transferable to a better paying industry or function.
So I was a senior executive at Hudson's Bay Company, and I started looking at the people above me, how much money they were making, how hard they had to work. They had to work weekends at the time. We suddenly opened Sunday shopping, which didn't exist before that. And I said, I got to get out of here. I don't love the ceiling, there's a limit to the ceiling and the hours are crazy, I don't want to work weekends. No, that was my choice, but I had to look elsewhere.
Great. I think that's a great way to round off this episode. And that brings us to the end of another great week.
So next week, what are we going to cover?
We are going to be talking about debt and credit cards.
Sounds pretty evil and entertaining. I look forward to it.
Okay, thanks again for joining us this week, and we will see you next week.